firstly, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the invitation. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, man. And I want to thank you first off for the message that you send and how you utilize social media to send that message, because frankly, even in the esoteric health type space on social media, there's a lot of similarities between messages in terms of how they're delivered. And yours is uniquely refreshing, man. The way that you express yourself via like the poems and stuff, and a couple of those I actually want to read. It's like a lighthearted seriousness, because what you're speaking about, you can tell you're passionate about, and it's something that's deeply ingrained in you, and it's serious. But the way that you present it is somehow lighthearted, and it's just like makes you joyful to read. I don't know. So I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for saying that. It means a lot. Warms my heart. I think the whole reason I was drawn to, I kind of started sharing online like 3 years ago or so, sometime in lockdown. And I figured, well, I'm a bit of an odd guy, always been a bit of a misfit or outcast, or at least I felt that way. And just figured it might as well be authentic. I see a lot of, the same shit everywhere. So I might as well just be authentic and see what happens. And I'm glad that you appreciate it, because sometimes it's a little difficult to share, stuff, but it's always fun to see it resonate, especially when it's something like way out of left field or something kind of unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm about to read something here that could be construed as out of left field, but I read it and like I said, it's just like a lighthearted. It's just inspiring. So I usually start by asking what your story is and what your background is, because I think that the stories that we live and the stories that we tell and the stories that we hear are pivotal to the nth degree to our lives. In a way, our lives are just stories that we're sort of writing and co-creating. So I want to read something that you posted in July of 2022 on Instagram. It goes, "Reborn, soaking in the rays, floating around the Milky Way. No time to stay, stuck in our ways. Rebirth, transformed. Old me is gone, dead. The new one rises with some surprises. Learning from suffering, hustling, bustling. Earning wisdom with scars on my soul. Flowing forward, cosmic catalyst, archival revival. Childlike, pure. Everything is happening for you, not to you. You can do if you choose to. If you choose to. If you choose to. Or you choose to." And the pictures associated with that are I think just as important. One's of you seemingly a few years ago or in a past season of your life. And simply put, for those listening, you don't look as healthy as you do now. And the picture to the right of it is what I envision vitality to be. You're in very good shape, you're tan, you're smiling ear to ear, you look healthy, you're at the beach. And in that picture, you can see the transformation that you've made. And I want to get your thoughts on what those words that you said mean, like the reborn, the pure, childlike, life happens for you. Like what does that mean to you?
At a deep level, poetry itself is a way to sort of express a feeling or an energy or a perception that we have. And we always use words to do that. Words are just like symbols that kind of convey this underlying energy or sense of the world. And if we speak sort of logically, I think a lot of that gets missed, or at least misconstrued, because the symbols that I'm using to express that are going to be different in your body mind. When you're hearing that, it's going to be different because you have different meanings, emotions, and memories attached to every single word that I do. And that's part of the difficulty of life and communication and language. And poetry can be a way to sort of subvert that, because you're not communicating logically using whatever side of the brain that is. You're using like the other side of the brain, and it has a different sort of emotion and impact to it. And you're going to make obviously a different meaning from that than I will. And it's going to be somewhat unique to you as well, because it's more of an art. Like we could both look at a painting and see something totally different, or have a whole completely new understanding of what that is. And poetry is kind of the same way, where it's a work of art. So for me, when I think about who I used to be and how I've changed from then, I like to think about, or at least the concept of that's coming to mind is the idea of suicide. I think I have this sneaking suspicion that most people have had suicidal thoughts by the time you get to like in your mid 20s, because the world's pretty fucked up. So it's wouldn't be surprising me at all if everyone has had suicidal thoughts. And I heard once what is that? What is that? Within us, suicidal thought, because it doesn't make sense, right? Why would you think about killing yourself? And there are tribes, in the hunter gatherers in the Amazon that it doesn't make any sense to them. They're like minds were blown, and they're like, what? Like people think about killing themselves? And yeah, it's how fucked up, it doesn't make any sense for an organism to want to end its own life. So I heard someone describe it once as you're wanting to kill a part of yourself. And that made so much sense to me, because there was a part of myself that I was just like really fed up with and had been leading me down this path, which is another bizarre thing about life, is where we want to do something, but then there's a part of us that just won't do it, or no, it'll just do something else. And it's just so frustrating. So yeah, to me, it means that if you want to overcome something in life, you actually do have to kill that other part of yourself, or at least bring that mentality or that energy to the table, where it's somewhat of a savage vibration, where you are, hell bent on becoming something new. And you do in a way have to kill that old self, suffocate it from energy, and become someone new. So that in a way is how I would describe that in another way.
Right on, man. So much to unpack there. The first thing that comes to mind is the words in that poem, the pure childlike. And when we're children, perhaps the purity in it is that there is no logic. When I'm 9 years old or 8 years old or 5 years old, and I'm like playing with my brother or my friends with a stick. Like, for example, I thought of my brother's dog this morning, got so stoked over a stick and like was like freaking out. And I'm like, can you imagine how cool life would be if we had that simplicity of mind? And in a way, that's what I think you're referring to, that childlike, not illogical, but it's not, you're not focused on the logic. And I totally agree. I've never thought about poetry in that way, because even that little short poem, it's not like a logical progression. It's not like one thought to another to another. It's what's ever coming to your mind and you're expressing it. So that pure childlike, not like lack of logic, but just like the free flowing. It's very cool, and I think that was really eloquently put. And there's a verse in the Bible, I can't remember where it is, but it talks about sort of what you to allude to what you just said about you want to do something but you don't do it, or like you don't want to do something and you do it. The verse goes something along the lines of, "I know not what I do, for I do what I hate, and I do not do what I love," or something along those lines. And it's just like one of these weird battles in our heads. I don't know why humans have that experience, but we do. For the suicide, to reference the suicide, like that's de-evolution. Like that is literally a devolving trait. Like an organism seeking to end its own life. And I agree with you. I think that many people, if not most, have had some sort of ideation of suicide, myself included. It's just like it's a very finicky thing, and it's also very taboo in many ways. So I appreciate you bringing that up. That's pretty powerful in itself. But I want to ask you a question based on the last part of what you just said, in terms of you have to kill that, like a part of yourself. How do you do that? Like how does one go about killing the part of themselves that they no longer want to inhabit?
Dang, that's a good question. Honestly, I no idea. It makes me think of a fight, UFC fight, or maybe you've been in a fight, or you've had some experience with martial arts. They all unfold in a different way. Like there's no formula for winning a fight, or winning a jiu-jitsu match. But you've got to just bring the energy of ruthlessness and relentlessness, and assertiveness, aggressiveness, courage. If you are able to tap into these positive emotions, all the things that we really respect and admire in people, when we look at not necessarily famous people, but anyone in your life who you respect or admire, it's always because they exemplify one of these positive traits or emotions. And I think having to tap into that is how you win a fight, whether it's a physical fight or a fight within. And stoking that flame, I think is probably the key that a lot of people miss, is where they just like, it's day one, we're going to do it. And then they run out of fire and they give up. But like continuing to stoke that flame through deeper emotions, like I think a big, massive one would be meaning. So having some sort of meaning is going to be a real key driver. And there's a ton of great science and books about this. I think Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl was a fundamental novel or book for me. It's a very deep and powerful book, probably the most powerful one that's ever been written, aside from some of the like primary spiritual texts that have been passed down through the ages. And it really highlights the importance of having meaning in life as a inner force, a fire or flame, and stoking that on a regular basis, I think can be pretty powerful, that a lot of people kind of miss when they go on some sort of journey for transforming.
Yeah, and that book I've referenced several times on this podcast. I think Viktor Frankl, for people that have not read the book, he was a Holocaust survivor, and the way that I've sort of alluded to it in the past is he was in arguably the worst circumstance externally that you can be put into as a human being. I would argue the worst, because not only was he basically relegated to a number, he was forced to do things that he didn't want to do. Quote, uh, his every single, I don't even know if he knew this at the time, but every one of his loved ones were dead. Like every single thing that he had built up to this point in his life, dead. Circumstance, obsolete, desolate, just almost hell on earth. But he figured out a way to find meaning in that circumstance. And to me, that's so powerful to think about, because it puts into perspective, like you or me. I don't know what circumstance you're in, but like my circumstance, when I'm complaining or thinking negative thoughts about a certain situation, I'm like, wait a second, I'm not in a Holocaust camp. My loved ones are still alive. I can walk. I can do what I want. I can breathe. It's all these things, and it just puts it into perspective. So I just think that's so powerful, because it kind of exemplifies that meaning is a choice. It's not something that's like dawned upon us. It's not given to us. It's something that we choose to seek and to hopefully gain through how we live, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And it can be tricky too to go down that path of thinking, because like there's a billion people on the planet today who are living on less than $1 a day, American dollars adjusted. And and then you could be through this story. Woe was me. I'm so sad, and I'm essentially the 1% or the top 5% of people on this planet with all the gifts I've been given. But, I'm still, and that can that can get you deeper in the hole. Like, dang, I'm still, sad or whatever. At the same time, that can unlock another force, which is gratitude. So you combine meaning with gratitude, where I, I'm grateful for everything that I have, instead of being, oh, I wish I had more. I wish I had a job that I loved. I wish I had more money that I could spend on things. I wish I had, more friends or a lover who, understood me, or whatever, the story is in your head. Like you mentioned before, these stories run everything. You can rewrite that story, which is essentially the software that operates your body mind. So in incorporating more gratitude into that software will recode a lot of your experience. So you add in the meaning and the gratitude, and now you've got a pretty significant up level to your source code. And those two things together are pretty awesome. And you can add a lot more to that, but as a foundation, those are two great energy states that are completely free too. There's no cost for
Yeah.
incorporating these things in.
Do you have any daily or ritualized gratitude practices that you use or do?
No, I wish I did. I probably should. I'd maybe be even better off, if I did something like that. But for me, it's pretty random. Like it'll be while I'm walking, the thought will emerge and arise. It is somewhat spontaneous the way that I practice it. But I bet I could have, more benefit from doing it in a more disciplined or ritual way. I think I did go through some periods where it was more disciplined and ritualized as a way to kind of get myself used to it as starting out. But at this point, it's more of a spontaneous thing, often while I'm walking.
Yeah. Well, uh, I think you tweeted it recently about like 2 20-minute walks per day being like one of the highest leverage things you can do, or something like that.
Yeah, especially grounded. If you can be barefoot or wearing, grounded footwear, just getting that electron balance regulated has been just of primary importance. And just like 2 20 minutes a day is a great baseline to kind of hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've touched on your transformation a little bit. I want to get into the weeds of that, more or less. because this is one of the most fascinating things about this podcast for me thus far, is that like is learning about everyone's transformation, because everyone's had one, and sometimes they're more stark. Sometimes it's like, for example, a buddy of mine lost 100 pounds, and now he's a professional athlete and a top prospect. That's a very uh, visceral, like you can see that. That's like, wow, that's an incredible transformation. Other times they might look the exact same, but they've had this emotional, this intellectual transformation, philosophic transformation. For you, it sounds like it was a little bit of both. At least that's my uh, initial understanding of it. What do you think were the mechanisms that were like kind of holding you down, or keeping you in that less than vital state, I guess, is the first question. And then the second question on top of that is what was the impetus or the catalyst for that change to start to do that work on yourself and really transform?
My guess is that the mechanisms holding me back, holding me down are really cultural. I feel like we all go through life, go through the school system, and we're just given these pretty bad ideas into our head. They're just not very good. And let alone, it just like everything about it is I don't think it's intentionally designed to keep us weak, sick, you know, despondent, apathetic, but that's the effect of it for the most part. I don't think most people aren't, you know, on top of the world going through the public school system, even college. So we, go into a bunch of debt, and we are basically forced to learn things that we're not forced. But I mean, at that point we get to choose, once you get to college, you get to choose a little bit, but it's still not, guided fully by autonomy. It's not a class for everything that anyone is interested in. So yeah, you're basically forced into this industrial system from the get go. You got to sit in a chair. You got to do what the teacher tells you. Sit under these crappy lights. You're not really getting any movement. You're getting like essentially prison food. I think prisons and, and schools are just given the same bottom of the barrel quality nutrition, and yeah, and the people around you aren't necessarily the nicest, people in the world. So you just go through this system, and it's very low vibration, if you want to call it that. But you could also say it's a devitalizing experience. The entire thing. You got to wake up early and sit on the bus. There's just nothing great about it. I didn't have a good time. So that, is our culture. And you go through that experience. Oh, I forgot to mention. Yeah. You go to college, and alcoholism is celebrated, like for me, everyone was pretty much abusing alcohol is just what we did. And that, that does a number on the body mind. So by the time I got through all that and I'm out on my own, I'm just barely getting by as a result of it. It's just, nobody knows how to repair or regenerate. That's not, a common thing that anyone has talked about at that point either. So I just started researching, and then once you begin researching, at least for me, there's ideas on all sides of the aisle. People are talking about everything, of competing ideas as well. Someone says to eat only vegetables and plants. Someone says to eat only meat. And you're like, how the hell am I supposed to make sense of this? So just start trying stuff. I think luckily I always had something in me that wanted to be great, that wanted to be successful. I don't know if everyone has that, but I think I was very fortunate, very grateful to have had some sort of spark within me that I think I'm chalk that up to great parenting. My parents were both gave me a lot of love when I was growing up. So I'm very grateful for that, because I know not everyone had that experience. They weren't perfect, but nobody is perfect, and that was I think part of what was driven me to be helpful at least to the world the best I can, and just kept trying stuff. So the internet presents us with infinite opportunities, and if you just kind of follow your intuition and keep trying stuff, you'll get somewhere. It might not be where you want to go, but then you can shift gears. And that was the journey for me. And for a lot of people, it's all over the place. It's, one step forward, two steps backwards, three steps forward, four steps back. It's a roller coaster. And if you just keep walking it, you'll eventually get somewhere. And that's what it was for me. It wasn't straightforward, but kept trying stuff, and now I've got some wisdom to share. So I'm online just trying to give it to people to help guide them, because there's a lot of dead ends and wrong roads out there. So I know that there are truths that are very powerful, and if we can share them with each other, we can get out of this health crisis that we're in, because more than half of America is obese, overweight, depressed, and it's a dark situation and we can get out of it. We've got the tools, we have everything we need to escape this darkness. And it's important that we all kind of get together, share the best ideas, and begin to elevate our vitality, because otherwise we're headed for some dark lands, and we can form a flourishing future if we all kind of work together on this one.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I fully agree with everything that you just said. It the journey is so different for everyone, but I think that there is a point where it starts with, like, when people take this journey towards like self self mastery, self actualization, uh, a more sovereign and vital life, whatever you want to call it. But I think it starts with just questioning. Like you talk about, we grow up in these programs, these schools, this awful food, the college program, the university program, the corporate sort of rabbit hole. I think it honestly, at least for me, it sounds like for you and many people that I've spoken with, it starts with just like this intuitive question, like just like it could be a singular question about one thing. Like I spoke to a guy on who's become one of my friends now. It's really cool. He's a father, young husband, and he kind of lived a regular, not regular life. He lived a unique life up to that point, but when he had his son, he started questioning. He was like, "Wait a second, why does this happen?" And now it's just gone exponential in terms of the level of wisdom and awareness that he's had. And I guarantee you that uh, he would submit that he's more vital and his family is more vital and will continue to be so because of that questioning. For him, it was baby soap. Like that's literally the thing that changed his life, was wondering why there was baby soap and why they needed soap that I couldn't use, like that I could use as an adult and stuff like that, which I find so fascinating. And you mentioned a word, it's devitalizing, which, if anybody follows you, anybody knows you, vital living, it's part of the reason that I reached out to you initially. It's just your take on vital living is unique. Like I've mentioned, you do a lot of unique training, unique like principles in terms of fasting and stuff. What does it mean to you to live vitally, like to have a vital life, or to embody vitality? What does that mean to you?
Vitality is a cool word. A cool word. I'm drawn to it because health is such an overused term. And when we say health, people are like, oh, lean chicken breasts and running on the treadmill. That's like the idea. So our brains
Yeah.
work on these things called affiliations, where if I say a word, that word is linked to emotions and memories within you. And this is like a primary concept within marketing, and big businesses use this, to their leverage. Think about Coca-Cola. It's like, enjoy life. You got all these bubbly emotions with something that is effectively poison. And that's, the way that these companies are able to boost sales. They know that they're selling poison. The people who buy this stuff knows that it's poison, but they're drawn in by the memories and emotions, the affiliations that they have with this thing based on their perception. So, health is kind of a co-opted, I feel like, in a lot of ways, and become just like a conflict online. But I use the word vitality because that's kind of a fresh concept. People don't really have, too much familiarity with it. And for me, what that means is leveraging the forces of nature. So there are forces of nature that are vitalizing. That could be something like sunshine is a very vitalizing force. You're out in the sun right now. I'm very jealous. I'm stuck inside, but it's like well known to be a powerful force of nature. And of course, it's demonized. The sunscreen is said to be put on, but that actually blocks the vitalizing power of the sun. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But you can think about some other vitalizing forces of nature, like earthing. So that our planet has an electromagnetic field that comes from the clouds. Lightning hitting the earth every few minutes. There's a lightning bolt hitting this planet somewhere within the biosphere, and that generates an electromagnetic current throughout the force of this planet. And that's why being barefoot on the planet is vitalizing. This is known as earthing or grounding. It's another very powerful force of nature that we're able to tap into. Good quality food, it's an incredibly powerful force of nature that could be, organic blueberries. It could be something like grass-fed beef, could be eggs. And the more we're able to get that from a local place that is doing it with love and with care, without pesticides and strange chemicals, the more vitalizing that food is going to be. And you can feel this when you're eating a healthy diet versus, then you go on vacation. Maybe you have some food at a restaurant, cooking cereal. You can feel your vitality dip. It's not like you're unhealthy, right? You're still doing all right, but you go from like 90% to 70%, and you can feel that. I can feel that on a very salient level. So that to me is vitality, tapping into these forces of nature, and then using that to sort of feel my way through life. Because I'm not a zealot about any of this stuff. I'm not crazy about my health protocol. But I'm able to sort of navigate the flow of vitality as need be in order to be the person that I want to be in the world.
Well said. I think that the comment you made about like being a zealot, Noah Ryan, I'm sure you're familiar with him on Twitter. He had this tweet that I don't even know if it was purposefully influential, and I'm sure that if we talked to any of his followers or most of his followers, they probably would have noticed it, or at least for me specifically. He said, "I'm resilient, not neurotic." So in terms of the vitality, it's like you can get neurotic about it if you choose, but that's literally going to be it's like counterintuitive because you're adding stress to your life to try to make your life better, right? So it just when you take a step back intuitively, it makes no sense. And I've been there. I've been neurotic where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not in my routine. I didn't sleep well. I have X, Y, and Z food around, so therefore I'm not capable of doing the things that I need to do. And it's just this negative feedback loop. But once you kind of disassociate from that, like you've mentioned, and kind of ride the waves of the vitality. And I think that actually comes with time. And you're obviously your intuition in regards to that is a lot more keenly refined or refined rather than somebody who's just starting out on their journey or than yourself 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Right. So I think that's such an important distinction is that it will get strengthened over time. Like for example, your diet, right? Like at one point, I'm sure your diet 5 years ago, you were thinking, oh, this is a good diet. Or maybe you didn't, but like for me, for example, I'm like, oh, this is a good diet. And now I look back, I'm like, what were you thinking, man? So it's just funny how that wave and that journey kind of continues. And on your pinned tweet, you like this is what I mentioned. I associate you with vitality. Frankly, like the word vitality on like socials, I'm like, oh, Case. You have like your 4 principles, more or less. I guess you could call them: eating true food, training in nature, beautifying local nature, and seasonal multi-day fasting. I would love for you to dive into each one of those. You kind of touched on a few of them just now, but like for the food one, for example, what is true food to you? Like what is that?
True food for me is the highest quality food that I can access. Um, well, maybe that's not the best way to describe it. I mean, you know, we live in a world where there's a lot of stuff called food, and be tough to call some of it food to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's true.
But you have to call it food because it's edible and you can live on it. And there's a lot of people that do, and there's a lot of people that are forced to based on their economic situation. So there's a fine line between, I don't want to call it fake food because it's real. People live on it for a while. The disease is inevitable if you eat it for the long term. And then there's the question of, okay, well, where do you draw the line? Like where does it become true food and where does it become fake and false food? And that's a really interesting question. And if we kind of think deeply about that, let's say cost is not a factor. You can afford whatever food that you want to buy. We're going to be looking at food that's grown locally. It's going to be grown organically, which basically no pesticides. They're going to be paying attention to the soil because that's where the nutrients of all the food comes from, the soil. So we want good quality soil. That's what makes good quality food. And if it's local, that means it's not being flown in from thousands of miles away, which is just kind of ridiculous on its face. So we think true food would be something that I could drive to, access, and eat without having to clean it off, without being subject to toxic chemicals. Even if it's a micro toxic chemical, right? Some people freak out about this stuff. It's a micro, toxin, and that, the way God intended, the way nature intended. It's aligned with the way our ancestors would have done it. That's true food. It's not the industrial stuff that's grown for the sake of money. There's a lot that's grown for the intention of profiting off the end user, the consumer, us, the human family. There's other food that's grown from love. Because to the farmers that are doing it, they love farming. They are growing food in order to nourish their fellow people, and that's true food. That's what food is. It's not a commodity. It's a work of art. It's a masterpiece of God, of air, of water, of soil, of the humans that are tending to the crops. And I think I read recently that only 1% of people have, or maybe it was Americans, have visited a farm or a ranch where they're able to get their food from. And if anyone listening is in the 99% that hasn't, I highly recommend doing it, even just for a field trip, with your friends or family, because they're beautiful places. It's almost like going to a zoo or a museum or anything like that people will do for fun. A farm is an amazing place with the animals, and especially a good quality one. There's one around here called Apricot Lane Farms. You recognize it maybe from the documentary Biggest Little Farm. And it's just one of the most amazing places I've ever been. There's hundreds of different foods. There's fruit trees and crops growing and wildflowers everywhere. There's ducks, there's pigs, there's chickens, there's dogs, there's happy, smiling, laughing kids running around. It's just like the kind of place you want that vibration, in food and then into your body. And that to me is true food. It's all this positive stuff that we are kind of talking about early, the courage, the ruthlessness, the relentlessness, the euphoria and the exuberance of life. All the good stuff is kind of encapsulated into food, and then that ends up in your body. So just kind of thinking about the best quality thing that you can consume and then become, that's true food for me. Just understanding what it is at a holistic level and then seeking that out as often as possible.
I think that we touched on this at length in my conversation with Zach Shankin over at the Vitruvian. He's the host of Vitruvian podcast on Tuesday this week. We talked about spelling and words and how the words that we use, and you've touched on this, like the health, the affiliation that people have with that word now is totally misconstrued. Farm is another one for me, and food as well. But I want to get on this farm one because I think a lot of people now, unfortunately, think of farms. They think of massive machinery, miles of the same thing, and it's like, who the hell would want to go to a farm, right? Like, not many people. But when you think about the apricot example you just mentioned, or white oak pastures in Georgia, which is where a couple hours from where I'm from, I never visited, but I've seen videos and heard people speak on it. It is a work of art. It's like this moving sort of sculpture. It's like how nature intended and how God intended that this animal lives in such a way that it actually it complements this animal's way, like even the grazing patterns and grazing styles of different animals. And if they're combined in the pasture, like a cow is a grazer, they eat off the top, and then you have chickens and turkeys that poke. So they're like mixing the soil and seed. It's just it literally is a work. And then you have fruit trees that are dropping fruit and all these things. It is a work of art. And the reason I brought that up is I'm trying to think of another word we could use instead of farm, because I really do think that the word farm has such a, even to me, I actually noticed this yesterday. There's a place in Austin called something pharmacy, but it's spelled FARM. Even the word farm, it's a part of pharmacy, right? So it's like, even that is like a weird affiliation for me. So I wonder if there's a word that we could use that's more in line with what a real farm is, in my opinion. And then to tie that into the true food, because the reason I even speak on that is because I've never heard somebody refer to it as true food. You hear like whole food diet or high quality food diet or like this, that, and the other. But true food has this even deeper level of, deeper level of meaning to me. And what I wrote down just now is food versus nourishment. It's like, yeah, food has this affiliation. Like, technically, slop is food, right? Like the seed oil, processed grains that are like processed sugar. No, it's technically food because like you mentioned, you can survive on it. You cannot thrive on it. Nourishment, on the other hand, is something that you consume that does what you just mentioned, where it like, it's a work of art that like breeds a work of art within yourself that you then put into the world. And it's like this beautiful cycle. So that's something that I've never really drawn the connection to, food versus nourishment. So I don't know. I felt like sharing that. That's pretty interesting.
Dude, we're all struggling with this. It's crazy because, never before in the history of our species have there been this like stuff that's being said to be food, but it's actually gonna, destroy your ability to function at some level. And it's really difficult in social if you're around people who don't have much awareness around this. It's like almost insulting if you're like, no thanks, I'm not gonna eat that. It's like crazy because people get insulted by that. And then it's like, God, how do I say like that food's, it's like you're eating fake food, man. It's like not, there's no way to really communicate it. It's very bizarre, the situation that we're in. I think a lot of us are trying to wrap our heads around it and talk about it because like you said, it's a tough nut to crack, but I think it's critical that we kind of do play with it and kind of tinker with it and figure out ways to kind of talk about it and communicate it because it's the root cause. This like fake food or false food issue is really a root cause of every problem that we face as a society, and it's a deep one. So it's critically important that we do kind of focus on it and tinker with it and kind of share it as best we can because it's gnarly.
It's so simple for me, at least when I detach and kind of think about it like from a logical perspective or even an intuitive perspective, however those are connected. It's like it's like just a simple law of nature. The input equals the output, some way, shape, or form. There are other factors that can influence the input or the output, but what you put in, you will get out. There are different levers and stuff that can be pulled, but to think that let's use America as an example. You mentioned it already. 50% of people are obese. People are depressed. People are taking pills every day. People are on SSRIs. People are lack of meaning. People are committing suicide. Specifically, men are committing suicide at a crazy rate. Right? To think that that's not connected to what we're consuming, which is literally the fuel with which our bodies burn to live. Like our lives are lived through our bodies. And if you think of our bodies as a machine, it's like we're putting in. It's like our machine runs on oil, and we're putting in like urine or like honestly, for lack of a better example, it's like it just doesn't compute. And the reason that it doesn't compute is because it's not how it's supposed to be. And that's why I think, like you just mentioned, it's the baseline, it's a foundation. If everything you're putting into your body is fake food and poisoned and has mycotoxins and has any number of microplastics, all these things, it's like disgusting to even think about and say out loud. If you're putting that into your body, there's no way it just doesn't compute to put that into your body and then to get out some beautiful work of art that is your life. So I think that's such a fundamental thing. And I think it's apropos that you put that as the first thing on your list of like vital principles rather. And to get back to that list, the training in nature, this is also something that anybody that follows you will know. I think it's so cool, man. Just like the pictures and stuff of you like working out at the beach or doing like handstands or the toe hangs, which I want to get into later. What is training in nature? Why is that something that's so important to you?
This is maybe somewhat unique to me being an inhabitant of Southern California where it's every day is, very nice, especially considering I grew up in New England where it was less nice, less inviting to be outside. And here it's like year round is fantastic. So I'm, other places maybe are less receptive to this message, but I think everyone, no matter where you live, there are nice days sometimes, and you just want to be outside. So for me, I wanted to be fit. Love movement training, exercise, working out. It's all awesome. And I also wanted to be outside. So I was kind of struggling. I'd be in the gym and it would have this big windows. It was like LA Fitness. And I'd be looking out on this beautiful sunshiny day. And next to me, there'd be like a guy like grunting and sweating, and he'd be wearing this cologne that I didn't want to be inhaling. And he's like staring himself in the mirror and just like, I don't want to be around this guy. And then, I'd look outside and it's just so nice. And like, how can I be out there while also engaging in movement practice? And I was like, just figure it out, and went for a bike ride because what are your options, right? If you have that desire, it's like, okay, you can go run, you can go bike, you can go hike. Like those are kind of the options for like outside. You can play sports with your friends. Those are the options, right? And then I went for a bike ride, and I stumbled upon this place. It was a outdoor calisthenics park. It's called Original Muscle Beach in Santa Monica. It was built during the Great Depression, so in the 1930s, and it's got ropes that you can climb, rings you can swing on, bars you can do dips or pull-ups or chin-ups, and there's a green space where people do acro yoga, which is like this partner yoga type uh, exercise. And I just was drawn to it. I was like, wow, this is a very cool place. Sort of like you got a circus, you got a lot going on, and people are training. So I just kind of parked my bike and I started doing some chin-ups and watching other people engage in movement practice. This was like 6 or 7 years ago. And I just kept going back and eventually quit my gym membership and just kept going there consistently. And what I learned was that you can train fitness anywhere as long as you have flat green space. And chin up bars, pull up bars help, dip bars help, but you don't need those. They're all just tools, and you can use a tree branch if you want. I've done that before. You can do a lot of great exercises on tree branches, tons of calisthenics moves, yoga moves, and as long as you're moving your body, you're training for health. And the cool thing about being outside that I've learned is that I'm able to tap into these forces of nature that I mentioned before that help vitalize my body, mind. So that would be earthing and sunshine primarily, but also fresh air. Like I mentioned, being in the gym, not inhaling the cologne of the sweaty guy next to me, which is a xenoestrogen, something that you don't really want to be inhaling, all these nasty perfumes and colognes if you can help it. So being outside, I'm able to get fresh air, which is a vitalizing force within itself that not too many people talk about. But fresh air is imbued with all kinds of positive, vitalizing phytoncides, for example, from that tree behind you. It's emitting phytoncides, which are well known to bring down stress levels, boost mood, and have a whole portfolio of beneficial factors on us that we're closed off from when we're indoors. So training for nature for me is a way to access and express my fitness and love of movement while also accessing these deeper forces of nature that are very vitalizing in a powerful way.
Yeah, man. And the comment about the New England, even when you said that, there's this ideology that we need to be relying on the sun and stuff, and I am totally a part of that. Like I love the sun. I don't want to say my life revolves around the sun, but I do my absolute best to get in the sun as much as I can, to be in sunny places that are warm and that invite me to go outside. And I apologize for this plane flying over. Um, that's probably pretty loud. But even in alignment with your idea of training in nature. So somebody that lives in New England, for example, they live in a certain environment that has certain external forces that are active upon it. Let's say the winter. The winter in Southern California is extraordinarily different than the winter in New England. And for anybody that's been to Boston or Maine in the winter, you'll know what I'm talking about. And we've been like this affiliation, like with working out. We affiliate working out with the gym. So it's like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym today. It looks like I can't work out. When it's like, wait a second. Trevor Funk on episode 17 of this podcast mentioned something so profound to me. All you need is 3 feet of space and intention. And that's exactly what you just said. All you need is space, like a grassy field, and you could get the most gnarly workout, the most gnarly movement practice, which is a great phrase that I've never heard used. You could train with 3 feet of space and intention. That's all you need. But we have this affiliation with working out and the gym. So, if I'm going to work out, I have to go get an iron bar and put it on my back and move it in and lift it up. And I have to be in this area that's LED lit and has this horrible music playing in the background and artificial turf and all these cleaning products all the way around and all this crappy stuff that, like you mentioned, I don't want to be around. And to go back to the New England example, somebody that lives in that environment, that is a subject of that natural environment. In the winter, it's harder, it's more difficult, but maybe that's part of the movement practice. Go swing an axe and chop wood. Go on a walk and get some thermal regulation, get some cold exposure. Go jump in a cold river. Go do whatever, right? Like go hike. Like it's there's ways to adapt to the environment in which we find ourselves or put ourselves in. And I think even that can be in alignment with your practice. It doesn't have to be all sunny and go hung and light breeze like Southern California. You can still train outside. And this is something that I need to take into account. I'm saying it, but like I need to be better about this. I can go train outside wherever I am. I can find something to do. And to harken back to kind of the underlying message thus far of your side of the conversation, it's like that built in. It's like ancestral. That's what we've been doing. Like the Comanche Indians who controlled like most of America, or like a large part of America at one point, didn't go to the gym. They didn't go lift iron, right? They just moved around. They just like ran, they just did stuff outside in these vitalizing forces. So I think that's such a cool and refreshing way to think about it. It's almost like freeing, because it's like, oh wait, I don't need a gym. I can save money. I could go hang from a tree branch on my toes like Case.
Yeah, no, it is liberating. You're right, and especially when you realize, oh, I can get a great workout in anywhere when I'm traveling or when I just don't feel like being inside. And if anyone wanted to get started on this, I'd say the best starting point would just be barefoot sprinting in a field or a beach or a hill. For one thing, is you're gonna have a ton of fun, especially if you haven't sprinted in a while. I think as we were kids, we would all go barefoot sprinting was like a big part of life, and it's so much fun. And you can even get some friends together. Hey, we're all gonna go do some barefoot sprints. Be shirtless, shoeless. It could be up a hill. Could be in because you can't do in a gym. You really you cannot. No gym's gonna let you run around barefoot at full speed. So yeah, just that's a great one where you kind of need to be outside, and it's just so much fun to be in that state. Get pretty high from it. To be honest with you, you're going to get endorphins. You're going to be, pushing your body. Just make sure you warm up first if you haven't done it in a while. Don't pull your hammy and then come complain to me about it. But that's a great one, a great starting point that most people are be able to do, and you can't do it in a gym. So that's start there if you're looking for a place to go.
Totally. And not to beat a dead horse, but like what you just mentioned in that reframe is like you're in the revitalizing forces of nature. And I think people, myself included, I've in the past made the gym the main thing. You know, that quote is like, keep the main thing the main thing. The gym is not the main thing. Movement practice and working out and training your body and moving your body and getting into your physical body is the main thing. We affiliate, it's like a role reversal. We affiliate the gym with that. And so the gym becomes the main thing. Like I had this tweet or thought like long time ago. People will drive their car. They will get out of their house, drive their car to a gym to walk on a treadmill inside. And that has never made sense to me. Like since I was a kid, I was like, wait a second, why don't you just go walk on your street? I know everybody doesn't live in an environment where maybe that's optimal or safe. There are exceptions, but I think they prove the rule. The vast majority of people listening to this and people that follow you uh, have the capability of walking around somewhere. And even if you're going to go drive somewhere to walk, go drive to a park, not a gym. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that one, especially when you layer in the understanding of earthing and being barefoot. It's insane. It's absolutely insane to be inside using a treadmill when you can be barefoot outside in the sunshine, in the fresh air with your bare feet, absorbing free electrons, electromagnetic energy, which is well understood to bring down inflammation, increase our energy. These are things that are free as well. So yeah, to think that you would pay for a lower quality experience is the definition of insane. But I think there's a prevalent amount of insanity. And I don't mean that like in a judgmental way, just like from a root level understanding of what insanity is. I think a lot of us have kind of gone insane, myself included. But I think we all need a healthy level of insanity, to get through this thing. But yeah, going through the gym to use the treadmill is crazy. I think the most valuable thing to do at a gym is like lifting heavy, and I miss that sometimes. But I think to anyone who is now wondering, well, how can I lift heavy and be outside? My challenge to you would be, how many one-arm push-ups can you do? How long can you hold the handstand? Can you do handstand push-ups? Can you do one-legged squats? Can you do pistol squats? Those are difficult movements to master, and they're going to challenge your body mind in a way that's a little bit beyond pure raw strength heavy lifting. You're going to get more mobility. You're going to get more balance, and these skills, these ways of training movement have benefits beyond the experience itself. Difficult to describe, but our body is our mind. The body mind. I've used that term a few times in this podcast, and it is a real thing. You will notice changes to the way that your mind works as you move your body in a different way, especially out in nature. And can't describe it, but it's something that you'll definitely experience as you go down the path if you choose to do so.
Sure. And there's a quote, I don't know who to attribute it to, I think, in a Greek, maybe a Stoic philosopher, but it's a strong body in a strong mind, which when you break down the what that's actually saying is it's the body is a part of, which means the body is the mind. Like you want a strong body in a strong mind. For a long time, I thought it was a strong body and a strong mind, but it's actually a strong body in a strong mind because, as you mentioned, and that's another phrase that I've never heard used except for you, your body mind, because it is a part of it, and they're so connected. We could dive into a rabbit hole about that, about like how we disassociate one from the other, but in fact they're almost one and the same. On the like on the thread of the tweet I'm referencing and like your four vital principles, the beautifying local nature. This is one that I think is kind of ties back into your unique message that you send. Like if anybody follows you on Instagram or Twitter, that like the pictures that you post, the aesthetics, the natural landscapes that you post and that you speak about are they are beautiful. It's like that's the most apt word to use. They are beautiful in the most real sense. So why is that one of the three? It might seem odd for somebody, like if I went up to you and said, hey, what are 4 ways that I can be the most vital version of myself? Yeah, I believe that most people would be like, number 3 is beautify local nature. What are you talking about, man? So Case, what are you talking about in that when you say beautify local nature?
Well, that's a great question and a really interesting way to think about it. I haven't thought about it in that way. For me, it was just something I did because there was a lot of trash on the ground, and my girlfriend and I, we decided to clean it up, and it felt really good. And the whole point of life is to feel good, so might as well chase that feeling. And that led to us just going back to the beach with bags and cleaning up the plastic pollution. And at one point, I got a fish scale off Amazon. I think it was $10 just to measure how much trash we were pulling up. And it would be like 5 pounds, 15 pounds, like 23 pounds. And we just kept track. So right now we're at 400, almost at 400 pounds of trash over the past couple of years. And it's a lot because most of the things are like cigarette butts, which weighs, nothing, or like small pieces of plastic. But other times it'd be hauling, something large, like a, piece of wood, or I don't know, like a whole meal that somebody ate and just left, their entire takeout meal as if, the world is their garbage. And
Yeah.
it's so that I mentioned that it feels good to do. Like it does, like there's this, psychological study or research around a topic they call it the helper's high, which is this very good feeling that you get when you do community service. And the fact that there's plastic pollution pretty much everywhere in most urban and even suburban rural environments, that it's essentially a free high waiting to happen if you have the courage to stand up and say, I'm not going to stand for that, I'm going to pick it up. And then you're going to be rewarded with a really nice suite of neurochemicals in your mind that just like are uplifting. And I think when we contemplate this concept called, climate change or the climate crisis or global warming, like we hear a lot about this, and it's always centered around the concept of carbon. Oh, there's too much carbon in the atmosphere. Well, I think that's, a little bit crazy to focus on because I can't feel that. I can't taste it. I can't smell it. And from what I understand, regenerative agriculture is a perfect method to be able to resolve that issue. And then it comes with a byproduct of the most delicious, nutritious food in the world. So that problem is taken care of in my mind. A problem that no one's really talking about that is super gnarly and pretty disgusting is the amount of plastic pollution in our environment and in the ocean. And there's not that many people doing anything about that or talking about that. These break down into microplastics and nanoplastics, and that ends up in our food. So everyone's now talking about not being able to eat seafood because it's so polluted by microplastics and heavy metals. And it's that's disturbing because seafood's one of the primary food source for most people on the planet. It's delicious, it's very nutritious, and I think if we could somehow tackle the problem of plastic pollution, we'd all be a lot better off. And if we were to focus on that as the primary problem, we'd be a lot better off than if we were over here talking about the bizarre concept of carbon. So a lot of people have this idea that climate change is a what it's a hoax, and it's like
Yeah.
maybe to some degree it's being leveraged as a way to promote big business profits to sell you plant-based garbage and electric vehicles, but the environment, nature is definitely suffering. I think there's something like 200 different species being extinct every single day because of the choices we make, mostly in the first world as modern people, and our consumerism and our obsession with plastic seems to be a pretty big driver of that in my mind. So I don't know. I'm something I struggle with. I wish I could be better at, but cleaning up a little bit of plastic just from the environment is a great way to kind of contribute and feel good.
It's a fascinating connection to make between that and the activity of doing what you're referring to and increasing your vitality. But when I dive into what you just said, what also are you doing when you pick up plastic on the beach? You're getting you're getting sun, you're grounding, you're at the beach, you're with people sometimes, you're having a fun time. You're almost making a game out of it by trying to reach a certain pound. Talk about lifting, you're lifting weights. Like reality is over the course of time, how many hundreds and hundreds of pounds will you have lifted? And uh this is in no way a plug because the product not even out yet, but I'm this is called the Tyro Experience. Tyro is like sort of my motto in life right now, at least at this point. And later this year, I'll be releasing this is it right here. It's a Tyro glass uh, bottle jug, and it has a cork top. And the corks have proven to be a pretty difficult thing to acquire in terms of the purity with which they're cleaned and all these things. So I'm getting samples made right now from a cork supplier in Portugal. They will not be chemically cleaned. They'll be completely custom. And the whole idea is the first blog post I put on my website for that is better for you, better for the world. And so part of our mission is like part of the proceeds will go to ocean cleanup for that exact reason, because most people understand that plastic is bad for us, right? Like it is bad for us, and we can't even we wouldn't even be able to cover all the ways that it's bad for us personally, like human, right? And so the whole idea is that what's better for us is actually also better for the world. You're talking about regenerative agriculture. It's a perfect example. It's better for the environment and it's better for us. So this bottle will be 0% plastic for that exact reason. As it will provide us with the most clean vessel to hydrate, it will have zero negative effect, like even the caps, right? So people are concerned with the glass, the actual bottle, right? And because you can go buy this for relatively cheap, this right here, but it will come with either a very cheap small plastic top that is that is viable or liable to get lost. And when it gets lost, where's it going to end up? In the natural environment, in the oceans, in a turtle's mouth, in a fish's mouth, whatever, right? Or breaking down and leaching into the ocean. So I think there's an interesting congruence there between like the mission of that product for me and the hope of mine that it sort of impacts both sides of that coin, because it also just kind of clarifies the connection that we have with that nature. Like I believe like everything is connected, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you mentioned the healing. What was it? The healing high or the helping high?
Yeah, helper's high.
Yeah, the helper's high. I don't think it's a coincidence that we get these feel good physiological responses from helping better our environment, because I think there's just some like weird intuitive or ethereal connection between us. So I felt that's worth mentioning. I think that's a super unique principle, and I think that we could all do it. And it doesn't have to be by the ocean. Like for example, there's a park. I'm literally looking at a park right now, and there's immense amount of plastics. Like the other day, I'm walking out there, and somebody just literally drank a 6-pack of Miller Lights on the park bench and just left them there. I'm like, that's absurd. Like that's absolutely absurd. So it's a kind of a matter of biting the bullet, looking strange maybe to a few people walking by and picking them up and going towards the trash can. So I think that's right on, and I commend you for it. It's something we could all be better at. And I also, after hearing your side of it, think that adding that to the list of vitality, like maxing principles, is so so accurate. I think it's awesome, man. It's really, really cool.
It, yeah, I think community service, it's got its interesting, context around it. The people who do it, anyone can choose to do it. It's another thing that's free, and it's nice. It's helpful. It's just something to do. That's not. I feel like a lot of people, they're thinking about something to do. Often it's revolves around alcohol. Unfortunately, in the modern world, it's like, oh, let's go drink. At least that's kind of what a lot of people do. Or it's like, let's watch something. Those are kind of, I'd say, the two most popular, or like play video games. I bet those are the three most popular things that people do. But I do this with my girlfriend. It's a nice activity that we can do together, and like you said, a nice movement, walking around. You're like doing a lot of squats and lunges, and down there picking up trash. And there's obviously an aspect of it where it's unpleasant, right? Picking up trash, not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it's this idea of sacrifice and service that a lot of us are missing. It's another thing, like the meaning and the gratitude that I talk about is this like emotional state, or this way of being, that is nourishing at a deeper level. That is another thing that's free. It's a powerful force of nature. And some people may look at you a little weird, but you're also going to get other people who like really give you a lot of respect and admiration, and congratulations for doing that. And then you don't know the ripple effect of that. You can inspire them to then change some things, or to engage in community service. And it's pretty cool. I think community service gets like some lame vibes, maybe, where it's like, oh, you're going to the soup kitchen, the feed. Oh, what are you doing? Community but it's like, no, it's like, it's cool. You can do it with friends. You can do it with a girl. Maybe if you're single, you can ask her on a date, and if she's down to pick up trash with you, that's you can, right away, that's a pretty cool girl. So
Check some boxes right there.
You can go from there.
That's another one of those. I don't know if heuristic's the right word, or semantic maybe, but the community service, the affiliation we have with that, we think of like a punishment for like a DUI or a minor in possession, right? So maybe it's like humanity service or something, because it's like it's something about that sort of frame. I agree with you completely. It's like, oh wait, community service. Like what'd you do wrong, right? Maybe it's like there's a way to reaffiliate that with another word that sort of freshens it in people's minds. It comes back to the words we use in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I've been there too. I've done community service for getting in legal trouble. So it's a whole different thing when you're being forced to do it. It's very different from when you're choosing to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I agree with you there. But I'll do some pondering about a way to reframe that, because that's a great idea. And yeah, it's but it's true. Overall, what you're saying, I agree 100%.
Yeah, because it's also one of those things for you, like using social media, that's like one of those things, people tag people in certain things that they sort of coin. It's like, oh, I'm vitality maxing, or whatever you have associated with you. You could somehow create an association with that, if it was like a cool, like sorry for that plane again. But if it was some sort of catchy or cool, refreshing phrase, as opposed to community service, But so the fourth and final one of your principles is seasonal fasting, multi-day fasting. I find this to be pretty fascinating, because that's also free, right? It's something everybody has access to. It's actually it's more than free. It might be a positive financial investment, because you're actually saving money on the food. So yeah, you want to dive into that? What is that? How has that impacted you?
Yep. So I could talk about this for a whole another hour, but I'll give you the abbreviated overall high level story here. With multi-day fasting has had a massive positive impact on my reality, and it all started 2020, December 2020. I got an alpha strain of that thing that was going around, and lost my smell and my taste, and I was pretty disturbed by that, because I enjoy tasting things, and wanted it back. And a voice came to me and said to fast for 3 days. So I did. And lo and behold, when I returned to eating, I could taste food again. I was pretty stoked about that, because I was missing the taste of hamburgers. So, and then from there, I was like, wow, that experience was actually pretty crazy. Like, a voice came to me, told me to fast for 3 days. I did, it worked. What the heck is going on there? And dove deep into the fasting research, which there's not that much of. But there are some great books on the topic. So I read those and really became enamored by this thing that we call multi-day fasting, which is essentially the idea that if you don't eat food for like 3 to 5 days, our body goes through this entirely different gear, switches into like regeneration mode and heals and repairs at an upregulated level. And people are talking about all these crazy healing stories. I mean, some people go for way longer than 3 to 5 days. There are people who fast, weeks or months, or maybe not months, but like a month, a
Yeah.
little bit longer. 40 days is a famous one that Jesus did. And so other people do that kind of stuff. And the amazing healing stories, it just blew my mind. So I became into it because, I want to know about it, and I want to be able to share it with the people I love and anyone else that'll listen. So that has been a catalyst for me to be engaging in multi-day fasting, which for me is 3 to 5 days, so that I don't want to risk muscle loss. And then I'm doing it seasonally. So every 3 months, summer, spring, winter, fall, I'm fasting 3 to 5 days. And it's been a great practice. It's been, 3 years I've been doing this now and really enjoy it.
You mentioned Jesus and fasting, and it's mentioned all throughout the Bible. And another one that comes to mind is Gandhi, his famous fasting practices. Many spiritual figures and what's the word I'm looking for? The correlation or connection rather between fasting and spiritual enlightenment is well documented and pretty common in a lot of religions. And I think that's also something to be considered and to be pondered, because there's that physical benefit, right? But like, what does it do to the soul? What does it do to the spirit? I don't know. I can't tell you like the X, Y, and Z of why it is, but the longest fast I've ever done is like close to 40 hours. It's tough. Like I find it to be very tough. Specifically when I'm in an environment with food around, I just find it very difficult it's been a challenge for me to like extend those fasts past that certain threshold. But I think that the spiritual benefit is almost as or more potent than the physiological. And I'm sure those are connected on some like weird, maybe intuitive way, but they are connected. I don't think it's a coincidence in any way, shape, or form that spiritual enlightenment and fasting, and like you see these people go on these 5-day fasting retreats and 5-day meditation fast. And it's just like there's a clear connection between the two. Kind of to touch on what I just mentioned, and also please touch on that if you want. But like, what are some tips for you? Like, how do you? Because it is a difficult thing. 5 days of fasting to a lot of people sounds like a monumental task. To me, that sounds like a very difficult thing to do. What are your What would you tell somebody that's asking you, how do I do that?
That's a great question, and I'm happy to elaborate on it because it's pretty mind blowing my experience with it. And just to start with the spiritual aspect here, 100% on point there. It's every major spiritual tradition has ritual fasting, long extended fasting as a primary component of it. And there's debate around whether multi-day fasting is even physiologically beneficial to our hardware, to the body. And I tend to feel like it's, good for me. But from a spiritual aspect, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. We all have a voice in our head. A daemon is what the Greeks term that. It's, our inner wisdom. And that becomes very clear and calm as you go deeper into a fast. Longest I've gone is like 5.5 days, if you want to, be finicky with the numbers. But once you get into that like 3, 4, 5 day range, it's really a beautiful experience. And it's among my favorite states to be in. It's actually more enjoyable to be in a deep fasted state than it is to be in a feasted and fed state, which is very difficult to believe because the first 2 days are difficult. Especially when you're learning how to do it and you haven't had the reward of accessing that state into the day 3, 4, 5. Once you're able to learn how to get to that point, which takes practice and also is a muscle that you build up. So if you decide to engage in multi-day fasting seasonally or whatever rhythm is best for you, it could be yearly, it could be, bi-yearly, you will get better and better at it. And it will get easier and easier each time. Even though it's 4 months, 3 months apart, there's a noticeable, muscle or muscle memory with the experience, which is pretty mind blowing because you'd think if you went to the gym once a season, you wouldn't have any of those gains, carry over. But it does with the multi-day fasting. It gets easier every single time, and there is a massive reward once you get to day 3. Autophagy and ketosis, and there are all these scientific processes that come into play where you begin basically turning your inner food, your body fat, into fuel at a more efficient rate as time goes on. So once you shift into that mode, you're just kind of living off your own body fat stores. And a lot of people demonize body fat, like, oh, I hate this stuff, but you should be grateful for it because it's insulation against starvation. And we're able to use that as food. That's what it is. It's just, it's our own inner pantry, and we can just use that for our meals once you shift into ketosis, which is the fasted state. And it really is hard to believe, but the first 2 days are the most difficult. And then at some point you shift gears, like in a, if you've ever driven manual or ridden a bicycle, shifting gears is like, oh, this is a whole different, plane of life here as I move down the path. And something like that does happen around day 3. So if you can learn to get to that point and feel that shift, then you'll find that days 4 and day 5 are actually better than the first two, as hard as that is to believe. And yeah, there are definitely amazing benefits to the spirit that I recommend everyone learn to experience at least once in their life, because it's fantastic.
Yeah, man. And I know you got to get out of here in a handful of minutes. That being said, I really hope that we can get you hopefully to come back on here, man, because I want to dive into that a lot more. I could that entire topic I feel like could take up a podcast, and I would love to discuss that further with you because I have so many questions about it. I really do. It's not something that I've dove into a bunch, but it does intrigue me and fascinate me. So that being said, I would love to have you back on to talk about that and dive into it a little bit more. But and raw milk, I wanted to touch on raw milk. We didn't get a chance. Your ice cream, your famous ice cream on Twitter and all that. But the last question, man, and I don't know if you've had a chance to really explore the Tyro Experience podcast or what it is. That Tyro, to me, really simply put, a Tyro in my definition is somebody that's standing firm in their arena, picking up their sword and fighting. It stems from the Latin word meaning young soldier, and in today's dictionary it means novice or beginner. So you can kind of see that correlation. But for me, it's the ones in the arena are the Tyros. In keeping with that spirit and that meaning, I want to ask you, what arena are you in? What is the fight that you are fighting today? Like what are you picking up your sword and running towards to try to conquer?
It's a war within against. There's a part of me that is weak, is scared, is lazy, and every day I kind of go to war against that person and try and become the person that I'm destined to become the highest version of myself, to become the man that I aim to be, who must now kill the man who I have been, who is no longer serving a purpose, serving a role, and must be destroyed at a fundamental level. Otherwise, I'll never be the man that my family needs me to be, that my friends need me to be, that the world, that humanity needs me to be. It needs to be more, needs to be better, needs to be greater. And in order to become that person who is capable of providing higher value for the world, being of greater service, I must examine my weaknesses and expunge them from my everyday life. And in order to do that, I've got to pick up the sword, ride into the arena, and slice that motherfucker's throat off, because otherwise I'm going to be stuck in, a place where I don't really want to be, which is stagnation and falling short. And in order for me to ascend on the path to greatness, which I know is my destiny, I'll need to cut that motherfucker's head off. So that's what I'm aiming to do today and every day. And it's yeah, didn't really think about it before you asked that question. So thanks for asking it. And then pretty stoked to go grab my metaphorical sword and get the chopping.
There is, simply put, nothing that I could add to that, man. That's probably, and I really mean this, that is one of the most fundamental pieces of wisdom that I've ever had the privilege of receiving. I really mean that. I'm going to go listen back to that probably in 15 minutes once we get off here. That's phenomenal. I really appreciate
Thank
that. I
you.
really appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and your perspectives. Like I mentioned, I hope we can get back on here and dive into some of the rabbit holes. And I apologize for that airplane as well, but I hope that we can come back on here and dive into some more rabbit holes. And it's been a real pleasure, Case. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Nolan. Thank you for having me on and asking so many great questions and ushering this conversation into many great directions. I know you're new to podcasting. I've listened to some of your past episodes, and you've definitely improved over time. And I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with it all. Thanks again, and yeah, hope you have a great rest of your day over in Austin. Thank you.
Right on, brother. And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation with Case. Case is one of the most unique communicators I've had the privilege of speaking with. The lightness with which he addresses intense and serious topics is refreshing and thought-provoking in and of itself, just the way he handles it. His answer to my last question has hit me harder than any other moment in my entire podcasting journey thus far, and I hope some or all of his insights have impacted you in a similar way. Connect with Case on Twitter at CaseBrad, that's CASBRAD, on Instagram at Case Bradford, that's CASEBRADFORD, Case Bradford. Check out his podcast anywhere you get your podcast at Peak Earth Pod, and visit his website, casebradford.com. Thank you for being a part of the Tyro Experience. Until next time, stand firm in the arena.